All right, fourth graders, we are ready for Module 5, Lesson 28, and today we're going to be using a line plot. So once you get your table of contents finished, we'll go ahead and flip right to our notes page. Now our notes look a little bit different today as we use our line plot, okay? And we're going to solve and try to understand some information using this tool and this graph. So I have a table over here that gives us all these student names, and it tells me the distance they ran in miles. And so our job is to take this information in our chart and to turn it into a line plot or a different type of graph. Now a line plot needs a couple of things before we get started. The first thing it needs is a title. And so we're going to say that this is the distance fourth graders ran, and I gathered all of that from this information in my problem. So I have my title that it's going to be the distance my students ran, and I have this is going to be our number line, and so I'm going to turn it into a number line by adding my arrows. And I'm going to notice, okay, that as I look at this information, I see some mixed numbers, right? And I see some 1 holes, I see some 2 holes, and those 2 have fractions. So I know it's going to be greater than 2. And so I'm going to start from 0. Okay, and I'm going to end at 3 because I know from my information here that I'm going to need something more than 2. And so now I'll just decompose this into 1, 2, and there's my 3. But I also need to now label because I don't know what all these numbers represent. And so the unit that our line is showing is right here. Okay, so this is distance that the students ran. And I'm going to say in parentheses, just like my table, in miles. Okay. Now with a line plot, what we're going to do is we're going to put lots of little X's marking up on our number line here. Okay, so I need to represent that 1X represents 1 student. This is our key or our legend that gives us some information. And so now I'm ready to take my numbers and put them on my line plot. And here's what I notice, fourth graders. Okay, I'm going to pay attention to my fractions first. I see a denominator of 2, so I've got some halves. I see denominators of 4, there's several. And I see denominators of 8. Good news is 2, 4, and 8 are all related when I put those on number lines. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and look for halves. So I've got 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and 2 to 3. And so I'm going to mark just right in half for all of those. Okay. Now, if I have 2 and a half, I just marked that. So because I have a student there, I'm going to put an X on top. And I want to label this because it's one that I'm going to be using, and it represents a student. So I've got Joe. He's taken care of. Now I'm going to look at fourths next, and I've got several that are going to be in fourths. Now, the thing about fourths is that I know fourths and halves are related, and that 1/4 is half of 1/2. So if this is 1/2, a fourth would be here and here. And I'm going to go through, and from where my half mark is, I'm going to put another in-betweener and mark my fourths. Now they're not labeled yet, but I know that I could go 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, and I could count all the way through. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to identify all of my students that have fourths as a denominator. So here's Ariana, she's my first one. And I need to put an X for her at 1 3/4. So I'm going to start at 1, and now I'm going to count 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4. So I'm going to label this since I have a student represented there. And I'm going to cross off Ariana. I'm going to check, check, check. Oh, here's another fourth. Saisha is at 2 1/4. So this I'm going to put my finger on 2 and then go, oh, here's 2 1/4. So I put an X for her right on top. I'm going to label that as 2 1/4 and cross off Saisha. Oh, here's another friend. Tyler is at 2 2/4. So here is 2 1/4. here at 2.5, I can also call 2 2/4. So I'm going to put, this is how a line plot works, an X right on top of it. And I'm going to stack them up as I go, crossing Tyler off. And now I've used all of my fourths as my denominators. So I have some students left and they have eighths as their denominator. And so I'm going to start and I'm going to think about, okay, if a fourth was a half of a half, an eighth I know is going to be half of my fourths. So now I'm going to come through and I'm going to half all these spaces. So here would be 1/8. That line is already 2/8. A new line makes 3/8. That line is 4/8. So I'm going to come all the way through and go halfway through all the hash marks I've already created. And as I'm doing this, I am creating my eighths. Okay. So now let's go ahead and find Bobby at 2 1/8. So I'm going to put my finger at 2. And I'm going to just check and make sure that I've done this correctly and count each tick mark and go 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and the next hole would be 8/8. So I'm going to mark 2 and 1/8. So I'll put a line, an X here. And I'm going to label this mark as 2 1/8. Now, you're going to have to write kind of small. We're getting smushed. All right, and I checked off Bobby. Morgan is at 1 5/8. So I'm going to come back down to 1, and now I'm going to count for 5/8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll mark my X and say this is 1 5/8. Check. All right, Jack is at 2 5/8. Here's my 2. I already know that here's my 4/8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's a 5/8. 2 5/8. Check. All right, next Jenny has 5/8. No whole number, so I'm going to come back down here and start at 0 and count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eighths. So I mark an X on the top, and I'm going to label that tick mark as 5/8. We can check Jenny off. Next, Anson had 2 2/8. So I'm going to come back to 2. Here's a 1/8, and oh, that means that 2 1/4 is the same as 2 2/8. I labeled it and I marked an X right on top. We'll check off Anson. All right, we've got one last. Chandra is at 2 4/8. So I'm going to stick at 2. I'm going to go 1, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. Oh wow, this one's going to have a lot. It is called 2 1/2. It is called 2 2/4, and now I know that it's called 2 4/8. So now I've used all of my table. I've completed my line plot. Okay, the point of a line plot is I can easily and quickly look at this and say more students ran 2 1/2 miles than any other. Okay, because there are 3 X's at that mark. Now we're going to take our page number 2, and I did not glue it in yet. Okay, I only glued in one because I kind of want to be able to look at both pages because I'm going to need to compare on my line plot and look at my question. All right, so I have my line plot and my questions because I'm going to want to use both to help me out. So I'm going to look first at this question. It says, who ran a mile farther than Jenny? Well, I'm going to come back and look and take a peek at my chart to see and find Jenny. And it says she ran 5/8 of a mile. So I'm going to start by writing, and I'm going to say Jenny ran 5/8 mile. Now, my question says who ran a mile farther. So that means I would add on 1 mile. And when I add a whole number and a fraction, I just smush them together. And so I'm looking for someone who ran 1 5/8 mile. And so I'm going to come back and look at my table. I'm going to look down the list for 1 5/8. Oh, there it is. And it was Morgan. Now I'm going to answer in a complete sentence because that's what 4th graders do. Morgan ran a mile farther than Jenny. All right, answer that question. Now it says, 2 students ran exactly 2 1/4 miles. Identify the students. How many quarter miles did each student run? So I've got a couple of things. I've got some numbers. 2 and a fourth is what I'm going to look for. I need to identify those students. So there's part 1. And I want to know how many quarter miles did each student run. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to look at my line plot. And I'm going to find where I have 2 x's. Oh, here's 2 students. These 2 students, and it is at that 2 1/4 mile. Okay, so let's come back over here and look who ran 2 1/4 mile. Well, here's Saisha, says 2 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and list Saisha. But I noticed on my list, I don't have anyone else that says 2 1/4. And when I look at my line plot, I also wrote down 2 2/8 because I know 2 1/4 and 2 2/8 are equivalent. So now I'm going to look that, oh, Anson is 2 2/8, and that's the same. So I can say Saisha and Anson, I'm writing in a complete sentence, ran 2 1/4 miles. So I answered one question. Now it says, how many quarter miles did each student run? Well, I have it written as 2 1/4. And if I want to know how many quarter miles that is, quarter is 4, I'm going to pull those out just like I would in a number bond and see. Okay, 1 would be 4/4. 2 would be another 4/4. So there's my whole 2, and then I had my 1/4. So now let's add up how many fourths. I have 4, 8, 9 quarter miles. They ran 9/4 miles. Okay, and that tells me how many quarters. So I just went from a mixed number back to an improper fraction. Now my question says, what is the difference in miles between the longest and shortest distance run? When I see this word difference, that tells me I'm going to subtract. So I need to find the longest and the shortest. So here I go back to my line plot. I'm going to look where my x's are, and the longest that I have an x at is 2 5/8. So I'm going to come back and say 2 5/8 minus. And now my shortest, so I'm going to find where my first x is closest to the 0, was 5/8. So I'm going to do minus 5/8. Well, look how lovely that turned out for us 4th graders. I can see that, oh, right here, these two like to associate together and group. So I can do 5/8 minus 5/8, and I know that's 0. And so what's left is right here, and that equals 2 miles is the difference. So we use our line plot and the table to help us answer questions about some information that we've gathered as some data. So excellent job. Now that you have this page finished, you can glue that in, and you were able to create a line plot. Great work today.